Reagan, I've got your math module program here, and let's take a look at it. Well, hold on before we do that. Um, Need to clarify something here because I'm looking at this, I'm getting a little confused. If I ask you what is the main function of your toaster, you probably say it's to toast bread, right? I put bread in. And then what if I said, okay, so is also the main function of your toaster to paint toenails? It has two main functions, right? And then the third main function is it washes dogs. And you're like, no, it has one main function. That's correct. Things have one main function. But I'm looking at your program and I see three main functions. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're not all the main function. There's only one main function. Other functions are not the main function. They're other functions. And we will learn how to write other functions later. Later on, we're going to have other functions besides our main function. Right now, this is our main function of our program. One main function. Let's take a look at it. Okay, first thing I see is define main. Here's your main function. It says Maria wants to decorate a room in her house and needs to know the distance to know what can fit in the room. Okay, the distance, does that mean like the length of the walls or the volume, or are you thinking about the volume in there? And then you print Maria. So this is interesting. You set Maria equal to a variable, which is another way to do that. You could have just put this in your print statement right here and not needed to set that, but that's okay if you want to set it equal to a variable and print the variable. Did the same thing here. She needs your help providing what room she should choose. And then you end your main function and start a new one. Wait a minute. I thought this was the main function. Now you're saying this is the main function. And you name this some variable, which is not a good variable name because it doesn't tell me at all what you're storing in this variable. And it's an input. It says, what room should Maria decorate? Okay, and then you're printing that. She should decorate the some variable. I'd probably called this room or something. And then you end this and start a new main function. And this one, you've set x equal to 4, y equals to 3, and you're like the distance between 2 points. You're doing the square root of the power. This looks like just from our sample program in our lesson. It has nothing to do with this assignment. Well, other than it shows you how to use the square root and it shows you how to use the power, but you have to import the math in order to be able to use those. So when I run this, what room should Maria decorate? I'll say bathroom. How about that? And that's it. That's all it asked me. That didn't calculate really anything. Oh, it says square root is not defined. That's because you didn't do at the beginning, you have to do the from math import asterisk. We learned that in the sample programs in our lesson 2. If you're going to use square root or power, you have to import the math functions. So now if I just say bathroom, see, it says the distance is 5. It calculated that square root issue because I had to import it. But let's look what the program was supposed to do. I'm not sure you read this, so let's read it now. Write an interactive program to calculate the volume and surface area of a three-dimensional object. It says to code the program, use Python idle. You did that. I'll check that off for you. Use comments to type a heading that has your name, date, description. Okay, that's the second thing on the template. You don't have your name, date, or anything there. Follow Python style convention with indentation and white space. Okay, you indented things properly underneath your main function, so I'd give you that. Meaningful names. Some variable is not a meaningful name. Well, you did define your main function. The problem is you defined it 3 times. And here you're supposed to create a word problem that involves calculating the volume and surface area. You were just creating a word problem that says to know the distance of what can fit in the room. Is that just like what is the length from one wall to the other? It should be the volume and surface area. So if you're doing this like a room, which would be great if it's a cube, the room is a cube shape, like it's 10 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 10 feet tall. That's fine, but in that case, you shouldn't ask them what room. You should ask them what is the length of the wall. Because it says print the description of the word problem. Okay, I'll kind of give you that. I don't know if it was necessarily the word problem you're supposed to have. Ask the user to enter information necessary to perform the calculations. You didn't have them tell you how big is the room. If you're doing this, if the room's not a cylinder, and I assume the room's not a sphere, I assume you're doing the cube, you would need to know what is the length of one side of the room. and that would be your side. So you would calculate the volume with the side cubed and the surface area with 6 times the side squared. These are the calculations. So I gave you these formulas in the template so you wouldn't have to go look them up or figure out how to find the volume or whatever it was. So if you want to make this a cubed shaped room, that's fine, but you have to use these. You did the distance formula between 2 points, which doesn't really work there. Use 3.4 for pi. Well, the one you chose here, if that's the one you're choosing, these two have pi, that one doesn't, so you don't have to worry about that. Print the results. Well, you print the results of the distance formula. Look at the pseudocode. I don't see any pseudocode here. And you didn't answer the postmortem review questions. I mean, this is worth 20 points. Pseudocode's worth 10 points. Your program's worth 70 points if it does everything. There's lots of issues with your program. So when you are working on your program, make sure you write your pseudocode, because the pseudocode is written right here on the same page that tells you what your program should do. Okay, enter description by word problem. Ask the user the radius or the length of the one side of the room, or whatever you choose for your problem. Then calculate the volume, calculate the surface area, print the results. Put those steps down in your pseudocode so that you make sure you have that in your program. So, okay, there's a few issues there. I'll get this back to you. If you want to redo it and resubmit it, you can do that, because you're missing a lot of points, especially not writing your pseudocode, not answering your questions after your program, and your program is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And you have 3 main functions. So, a little odd there. All right, we'll get this to you.